everyone. How are you all doing? Before we start today's radio broadcast, I have a small request. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep bringing you content like this. And one more thing, where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Let us know in the comment section below. Now, let's get started with today's broadcast. Good evening, listeners. This is Alex, broadcasting live on VoiceCast. I wish I were here tonight with a lighter story, something to ease your mind after a long day. But what I have to share is far from ordinary. In fact, it's like nothing we've ever faced before. Since early this morning, a growing number of reports have come in from hospitals, police departments, and everyday citizens describing something strange. It started as whispers, isolated cases of people acting erratically, reports of unusual illnesses. But as the day went on, those whispers turned into frantic calls, pleas for help, and terrifying stories spreading like wildfire across the nation. Doctors and nurses at several hospitals have described patients arriving with what seemed like a bad flu. Fever, chills, confusion, symptoms we've seen before during countless outbreaks. But within hours, those symptoms took a drastic and horrifying turn. Patients began showing signs of extreme aggression, lashing out at staff, attacking anyone nearby. One nurse, who asked to remain anonymous, told me, "It's not just sick behavior. It's like they've lost their humanity, their eyes. They don't look human anymore." By late afternoon, multiple hospitals declared internal emergencies. Entire wings were locked down as staff scrambled to contain these aggressive patients. And still, no one knows exactly what we're dealing with. Is it a virus? A toxin? Something we've never seen before? To make matters worse, unverified videos are now flooding social media. Some show individuals in public places, supermarkets, subway stations, suddenly collapsing, only to rise minutes later in a state of frenzy. One particularly chilling video shows a man at a grocery store attacking another customer without warning. It's grainy footage, but you can see the sheer chaos as others try to intervene, only to be overwhelmed by his almost inhuman strength. And then there are the emergency alerts, brief, cryptic messages from local authorities, warning people to stay indoors and avoid contact with anyone exhibiting strange or violent behavior. One such alert read simply, "Secure all doors and windows. Do not approach individuals who appear disoriented or aggressive. Emergency services are at capacity." It's hard to process, isn't it? Just yesterday, life felt normal. The world was buzzing along, full of the usual ups and downs. And now, here we are staring into an abyss of uncertainty. So, what do we know so far? The truth is, not much. Initial signs suggest the outbreak may have started in urban areas, possibly in hospitals, or other places where people are in close contact. Some are speculating about contaminated water or air, though there's no evidence to support this yet. Others, especially online, are raising more sinister theories. Could this be a bioweapon? A deliberate attack? Or is it a natural mutation of a virus we've encountered before? Earlier today, I spoke with Dr. Meredith Hahn, a renowned epidemiologist. She explained that while we're still in the very early stages of understanding this outbreak, the speed at which symptoms progress is alarming. According to her, what begins as mild flu-like signs, fever, fatigue, confusion, quickly escalates to full-blown aggression, loss of higher brain functions, and, in some cases, near-catastrophic organ failure. This isn't just fast, she told me. It's almost calculated. Viruses don't usually work this way. This one feels different. Dr. Hahn also mentioned that the transmission method is unclear. Some experts believe it's spread through bodily fluids, perhaps through bites or direct contact with blood. Others worry it might be airborne, though there's no concrete evidence yet. What we do know is that those who come into contact with infected individuals are falling ill at a frightening pace. As I sit here in the studio fielding endless calls and monitoring the latest updates, I can't help but think about how quickly things are spiraling. Less than 24 hours ago, none of this was on our radar. Now, hospitals are closing their doors, emergency services are stretched to their limits, and people are locking themselves in their homes, unsure of what's happening outside. But the scariest part? This isn't just local. Reports are now coming in from nearby towns, even cities hundreds of miles away. The pattern is the same. Sudden illness, erratic behavior, violence, whatever this is, it's spreading, and it's spreading fast. For those of you tuning in, I'll do my best to keep you informed. Stay close to your radios, phones, or whatever device you're using to hear this broadcast. Don't go outside unless it's absolutely necessary. And remember, this isn't the time to panic, it's the time to prepare. I'll leave you with this question, one that's been haunting me all day. Is this just another outbreak? Something we'll eventually overcome with time and resources? Or are we witnessing the collapse of society as we know it? Over the past few hours, medical professionals, scientists, and experts have been working tirelessly to understand what we are facing. While answers are still few and the puzzle is far from complete, a picture of this virus, if we can even call it that, is beginning to take shape. Let's start with the question on everyone's mind. Where did this come from? So far, there are no definitive answers, but theories are swirling. Some experts speculate that this could be a naturally occurring mutation of an existing pathogen, one that jumped from animals to humans in a way we've seen before, with diseases like SARS and MERS. However, others are less convinced. Dr. Elaine Carter, a virologist with decades of experience, shared her thoughts earlier today. The speed and nature of this outbreak are highly unusual. Natural mutations occur, yes, but this pathogen behaves in a way that defies the patterns we've come to expect. It's almost as if it was designed. That word, designed, is gaining traction in scientific and public discussions alike. Could this be a bioweapon? An experiment gone wrong? A whistleblower who claims to have worked in a government research facility suggested that this might not be entirely natural. In an anonymous statement sent to journalists, they hinted at a classified project involving the manipulation of viral genomes. We wanted control, the statement read, but we created chaos. Of course, this is unverified and officials have declined to comment. Still, the implications are chilling. What we do know is that the symptoms of this illness are unlike anything we've seen before. Dr. Carter and her team have documented a clear progression. Early stages. Patients initially report mild flu-like symptoms, fever, body aches, chills. This phase lasts only a few hours before escalating. Mid-stage symptoms, confusion and disorientation, set in, accompanied by severe headaches and nausea. Patients often become agitated, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Critical stage. Within 24 hours, patients exhibit extreme aggression, a complete loss of higher brain function, and a primal instinct to attack. Medical staff have described it as a switch flipping. The person they were is gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. One nurse shared her harrowing experience. He was my patient, just a man in his 40s with a fever. He thanked me for bringing him water, and then, within an hour, he wasn't human anymore. He lunged at me, teeth bared. We had to lock the door and leave him inside. I'll never forget the sound of him pounding on the glass. This aggression is perhaps the most alarming symptom, as it not only endangers caregivers, but also accelerates the spread of the virus. Speaking of spread, let's talk about how this virus moves. There's still much we don't know, but experts have identified 3 possible modes of transmission. 1. Bites. The most consistent reports involve infected individuals biting others. The saliva of these individuals appears to carry the virus, which then quickly infects the victim. 2. Contact with bodily fluids. Medical staff have reported cases where exposure to infected blood has led to rapid transmission. 3. Airborne particles. Unconfirmed. There are growing fears that the virus could be airborne, especially given the rapid spread in densely populated areas. Dr. Carter emphasized that while this hasn't been confirmed, the possibility cannot be ruled out. If this virus becomes airborne, or if it already is, we are dealing with a worst-case scenario. The scientific community is racing against time to learn more about this pathogen. I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Marcus Lynn, a virologist working in one of the few operational labs still analyzing samples. His findings are both fascinating and terrifying. This virus is unlike anything we've encountered. Its mutation rate is staggering. What we're studying now may not be the same virus we see tomorrow, or even later today. It adapts, it changes, and it does so with a precision that's hard to explain. Dr. Lin went on to describe how the virus targets the brain, specifically regions controlling higher reasoning and emotion. It strips away everything that makes us human. What's left is a body running on instinct, hungry, violent, and relentless. He paused before adding, it's almost as if this virus has a goal. It's not just surviving, it's thriving. It wants to spread, in a twist that feels more like fiction than reality. An anonymous whistleblower has come forward, claiming this virus may have originated in a high-security laboratory. They described experiments aimed at creating a virus capable of rapid genetic adaptation, ostensibly for medical research or defense purposes. People think this was an accident. Their message read, "It wasn't. We pushed boundaries we shouldn't have, and now we can't contain it." While this account is unconfirmed, it aligns with Dr. Lin's observations about the virus's rapid evolution. If this was indeed created in a lab, the question remains, how did it escape? As I share this information, I'm struck by how little we still know. Where did this virus truly come from? How is it spreading so quickly? And most importantly, how can we stop it? For now, listeners, all we can do is stay informed and vigilant. The more we learn about this virus, the more we understand just how unprepared we are. But knowledge is power, and even in the face of fear, we must hold on to hope. Good evening again, listeners. This is Alex from VoiceCast. As the hours tick by, the situation is escalating at an unimaginable pace. It feels like the world as we know it is unraveling before our very eyes. Reports from major cities are coming in thick and fast. Hospitals, already stretched thin, are on the verge of collapse. Medical professionals, those who are supposed to be our first line of defense, are finding themselves overwhelmed by an influx of patients exhibiting what can only be described as bizarre, violent behavior. At St. Mary's Hospital, one of the largest facilities in the region, chaos erupted earlier this evening. A nurse who managed to contact me shared her chilling experience. It started with a few patients in the ER, she said, her voice shaking. They came in with flu symptoms, high fever, chills, nausea, but within hours, they changed. One man stood up, staggered toward another patient, and bit her on the arm. We tried to restrain him, but he was so strong. It didn't make sense. He shouldn't have been able to move like that, not in his condition. She paused, trying to collect herself before continuing. The woman he attacked, her reaction was immediate. She started convulsing, screaming, and within minutes, she was like him. Aggressive, almost animalistic. We locked ourselves in a supply room, but we could hear them outside. They weren't just sick, they were hunting. It's hard to imagine the fear and helplessness she must have felt in that moment. And she isn't alone. Similar accounts are coming in from across the country. Entire hospital wings are being abandoned as staff flee for their lives, leaving patients, both infected and uninfected, behind. The question now is, how do you contain something like this? The short answer is, you don't. Law enforcement is also struggling to cope. Police departments are inundated with calls about violent incidents, many of which end in tragedy. In one chilling report from downtown, officers responded to a disturbance at a crowded apartment complex. Upon arrival, they found residents barricading themselves in their units, screaming for help. as infected individuals roamed the halls. Officer Ben Ramirez, who was at the scene, shared his account with me earlier. We thought it was just a domestic disturbance, maybe a fight that got out of hand. But when we got there, it was like something out of a horror movie. There were people running, screaming, and in the middle of it all, the things. They looked human, but they weren't. Their eyes were empty, their movements jerky and unnatural. One of them lunged at my partner, and we had no choice but to shoot. Even then, it didn't stop right away. It kept coming. Officer Ramirez described how they eventually managed to clear the building, but not without casualties. We lost 3 officers that night. Good people, brave people, and for what? We didn't even make a dent. The situation is spiraling out of control, not just because of the infected, but because of the panic they've created. Social media is flooded with unverified videos and images, each more horrifying than the last. Clips of people being attacked in broad daylight, crowds trampling over each other in their desperation to escape, entire streets littered with abandoned cars and belongings. It's impossible to separate fact from fiction anymore. One particularly haunting video, which has now gone viral, shows a family trying to flee their home. The camera shakes as the person filming, presumably a neighbor, whispers, "They're coming." Oh God, they're coming. Moments later, you see the infected pounding on the family's front door, their movements frenzied and erratic. The video cuts out abruptly, leaving viewers to imagine the rest. The sheer volume of these videos is staggering, and while many may be exaggerated or doctored, they paint a picture of a society on the brink. Fear is spreading faster than the virus itself, and it's driving people to desperate measures. Authorities are doing what they can to maintain order, but their efforts are proving woefully insufficient. Intercepted emergency broadcasts reveal the grim reality of the situation. One such announcement, which aired just minutes ago, stated, "All citizens are advised to remain indoors. Do not engage with individuals displaying violent or erratic behavior. Law enforcement and emergency services are at maximum capacity and may be unable to respond to non-critical incidents. Stay safe and await further instructions." It's a message that offers little comfort to those trapped in the chaos, and the distress calls from first responders paint an even bleaker picture. One paramedic, who managed to transmit a desperate plea for backup, described a scene that defies belief. "They're everywhere," he said, his voice shaking. "We tried to help, but they turned on us. It's like they don't even feel pain. We're losing people left and right. Please, we need help." But help isn't coming. Not in time, at least. The infrastructure that we rely on, hospitals, police, emergency services, is buckling under the weight of this crisis. And as the chaos spreads, it's becoming clear that this isn't something we can contain. The chaos isn't just confined to hospitals and law enforcement. It's spilling into the streets, the suburbs, and the rural corners of the country. Supermarkets, gas stations, and pharmacies have become battlegrounds as people scramble to gather supplies. Shelves are stripped bare in minutes, and fights break out over the smallest of things: water bottles, canned food, even batteries. I spoke with a store manager from a downtown grocery chain who described the scene earlier today. It was like nothing I've ever seen. One minute, people were lining up, trying to stay calm. The next, someone screamed that the infected were nearby, and all hell broke loose. People were shoving, grabbing whatever they could, breaking things. I saw a man push an elderly woman out of the way for a loaf of bread. A loaf of bread, that's how scared people are. Fear is a dangerous thing, and it's feeding on itself. Misinformation is spreading as quickly as the virus. Conspiracy theories flood social media, some claiming the virus is fake, a ploy by the government to control the population. Others believe it's divine punishment, or the result of extraterrestrial intervention. One particularly dangerous theory gaining traction is that the infected can be cured if caught early. Videos have surfaced of people trying bizarre, untested methods to treat their loved ones. Everything from herbal remedies to extreme measures, like burning infected wounds. These acts of desperation are only making things worse, leading to further injuries and even deaths. Governments worldwide are scrambling to respond, but coordination is proving to be a challenge. Travel bans and border closures are being implemented, but not quickly enough to stop the virus's spread. In some places, martial law is being declared, with curfews imposed and the military patrolling the streets. In New York City, for instance, National Guard units have been deployed to maintain order, but their presence has done little to calm the public. A journalist on the ground reported seeing troops forced to fire warning shots to disperse crowds outside a food distribution center. It's chaos, she said. People don't know who to trust. Each other, the government, even themselves. Amidst the panic, stories of individual survival stand out like flickers of light in the darkness. I managed to get in touch with Officer Ramirez again, who told me about a rescue mission earlier today. We got a call from a family trapped in their apartment building. They had barricaded the door, but the infected were getting through. It was bad, worse than anything I'd seen before, but we got them out. It cost us, though. We lost another officer. His voice cracked as he added, "Every life we save feels like a victory, but every loss is getting harder to keep going." Meanwhile, in a quieter neighborhood, another survivor, a single mother named Janine, shared her harrowing journey. When I heard the reports, I grabbed my kids and packed a bag. I didn't know where we were going, but I knew we couldn't stay. The roads were jammed, cars abandoned everywhere. At one point, we had to leave the car and walk. I carried my youngest on my back, holding my son's hand the whole way. We haven't eaten since yesterday, but at least we're alive. That's all that matters right now. Her story is one of many. A reminder that even in the face of unspeakable terror, the human spirit endures. As the sun sets on this chaotic day, intercepted broadcasts continue to provide grim updates. A particularly chilling message from a neighboring state declared that entire towns are now being cordoned off, with military checkpoints set up to prevent infected individuals from escaping. The broadcast ends with a stark warning. Any attempt to cross these checkpoints will be met with force. It's a harsh measure, but perhaps a necessary one. The reality is that containment efforts are failing. The virus is spreading too quickly, and the systems we've built to protect us are crumbling under the weight of this crisis. In one particularly haunting call I received, a paramedic shared what he witnessed at a hospital near the quarantine zone. It was like a war zone. Patients lying on the floor, blood everywhere. The infected, they weren't just attacking, they were spreading. Doctors and nurses were falling one by one. We had no choice but to leave. I can't stop hearing the screams. As I sit here recounting these stories, I can't help but wonder, what's next? How do we fight something that seems so unstoppable? For now, all we can do is prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Keep your doors locked, your families close, and your radios tuned in. As the hours pass, the initial confusion and disbelief have given way to something far more dangerous: panic. Across the country, fear is gripping people in ways we've rarely seen before. Governments at all levels are scrambling to respond, but their actions often feel too little. Too late. Borders are closing as countries attempt to isolate themselves from the spread. Airlines are grounding flights, and international travel has come to a near standstill. While this may slow the virus's march, it's leaving thousands of travelers stranded, uncertain of when or if they'll make it home. Curfews are being imposed in major cities, with officials urging residents to stay indoors after sundown. "This is for your safety," said one mayor in a televised address earlier today. But safety is a relative term. For many, the sight of military vehicles rolling through their neighborhoods is anything but reassuring. The military has been deployed to enforce these curfews and assist with containment efforts. In cities like Los Angeles and Chicago, soldiers are setting up checkpoints and patrolling the streets, armed and ready. But even they seem overwhelmed. I spoke to a National Guard sergeant stationed in Dallas who admitted, "We're not trained for this. Containing riots, sure. Dealing with a biological threat that turns people into whatever this is, that's not in the manual." Adding to the chaos are the conflicting messages coming from officials. Some leaders are downplaying the severity of the outbreak, urging calm and patience. Others are warning of worst-case scenarios, fueling public fear. This lack of coordination is creating a vacuum, and into that vacuum pours confusion, anger, and misinformation. Speaking of misinformation, let's talk about what's happening online. Social media, once a tool for connection and communication, has become a breeding ground for chaos. False reports, doctored videos, and conspiracy theories are spreading faster than the virus itself. One viral post claims that the government is hiding a cure. Another insists that the outbreak is a hoax designed to distract from a secret political agenda. While most of us recognize these theories for what they are, baseless speculation, they're having real-world consequences. Distrust in the government is at an all-time high, and people are taking matters into their own hands, often with disastrous results. Take the case of Jennifer, a single mother of two from the suburbs. She called into the station earlier today, her voice trembling with fear. When the curfew was announced, I thought, okay, we'll stay home. We'll be safe. But then I ran out of formula for my baby. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing, so I decided to drive to the store. What she encountered was pure chaos. The parking lot was packed, people running in and out with carts piled high. Inside, it was worse. Empty shelves, people fighting over the last packs of diapers. I tried to grab a can of formula, but someone snatched it out of my hands. I didn't even have time to react before the police showed up. They started yelling, telling everyone to leave. Someone threw a bottle, and that's when the tear gas came out. Jennifer managed to get out unharmed, but she returned home empty-handed. Her story is one of many. Across the country, supermarkets and pharmacies are being ransacked as people scramble for essentials. In some cases, these desperate actions are leading to outright violence. In Seattle, a riot broke out at a major retail store when employees attempted to limit the purchase of certain items. By the time police arrived, the store was in shambles, and several people had been hospitalized. For those who do manage to find supplies, the cost is becoming another hurdle. Price gouging is rampant, with some vendors charging astronomical sums for items like water, canned food, and medicine. One caller reported seeing a gallon of water priced at $50 in a small convenience store. "It's disgusting," he said. "People are profiting off our desperation. The panic isn't limited to resource shortages. People are fleeing cities in droves, clogging highways, and creating massive traffic jams. Abandoned cars now line the roads as drivers run out of gas or give up altogether, choosing to continue on foot. In one particularly chilling report from Florida, a family trying to escape the city was ambushed by infected individuals on the highway. Witnesses described a scene of utter carnage before authorities arrived to clear the area. And then there are those who have nowhere to go. The homeless, the elderly, and the disabled are among the most vulnerable in this crisis. Shelters are closing their doors, unable to handle the risk of infection. For these individuals, survival is a day-by-day struggle. In the midst of all this chaos, journalists like Amanda Cruz are putting themselves in harm's way to document the truth. Amanda contacted me from a supermarket in lockdown where tensions were running high between citizens and law enforcement. It was surreal, she said. People were arguing with the police, demanding to be let inside. One woman kept shouting that her son needed medicine, but the officers wouldn't budge. Eventually, someone tried to rush past them, and that's when the fighting started. It wasn't just pushing and shoving, it was brutal. I saw people being hit with batons, officers trying to control the crowd, but it only made things worse. Her voice faltered as she recounted the aftermath. There were kids there. I saw a little girl clinging to her mom, crying her eyes out. This isn't just about a virus anymore. It's about survival. And when people feel like they're fighting for their lives, they'll do anything. The government's attempts to maintain order are falling short, and it's clear that the panic is as much of a threat as the virus itself. The panic we're seeing is not confined to individuals or families. It's spreading through entire communities, disrupting every layer of society. Small towns that once prided themselves on neighborly support are now divided by fear. Friends and family members turn against one another, each suspicious of who might be infected, who might be hiding symptoms. Governments, desperate to regain control, are resorting to increasingly drastic measures. In some areas, entire neighborhoods are being sealed off with little warning. In a particularly shocking incident in Atlanta, residents of a low-income housing complex were forcibly evacuated by the National Guard. Eyewitnesses describe soldiers going door to door, pulling people out of their homes and loading them into transport trucks. The official explanation was that the complex was compromised. But no one seems to know where those residents were taken or if they'll ever come back. And then there are the curfews. Initially framed as a public safety measure, they've become a flashpoint for unrest. In cities like New York and Los Angeles, people are openly defying the orders, arguing that staying indoors without access to food, medicine, or essential supplies is just as dangerous as facing the infected. Police are struggling to enforce the curfews, and in some cases, they've had to retreat entirely, leaving certain areas to fend for themselves. One such area is a densely populated district in Houston, where riots broke out earlier today. A caller who witnessed the events described the scene. It started with just a few people breaking into a pharmacy. Then more joined in, smashing windows, taking anything they could carry. The police showed up, but the crowd was too big. They started pushing back, firing tear gas. But it only made people angrier. It was chaos. Fires broke out, and by the time it was over, half the block was destroyed. The economic fallout from this crisis is becoming another layer of the disaster. With businesses shutting down en masse, millions of people are suddenly without income. Banks and ATMs are running dry as panicked citizens withdraw their savings, unsure of what the future holds. The stock market, once a pillar of stability, has plummeted to historic lows, sending shockwaves through the global economy. For those still fortunate enough to have some resources, mistrust of financial institutions is growing. One woman I spoke to, an accountant from Denver, told me she's keeping her cash at home. "I don't trust the banks anymore," she said. "What if they shut down? What if the government decides to freeze accounts? I'd rather have my money where I can see it." But even with cash in hand, finding supplies is becoming a monumental challenge. The supply chain is breaking down as truck drivers, factory workers, and warehouse employees either fall ill or refuse to work out of fear of infection. What little goods do make it to stores are immediately snapped up, often at inflated prices. And while all of this unfolds, misinformation continues to pour into every corner of our lives, making an already dire situation even worse. In one particularly egregious example, a widely shared post claimed that drinking bleach could kill the virus. The post was quickly debunked, but not before dozens of people had been hospitalized for ingesting toxic substances. The psychological toll of this crisis is evident in every conversation I have, every story I hear. Parents are struggling to explain the situation to their children without terrifying them. Elderly residents, isolated and vulnerable, are being left behind as younger generations focus on their own survival. And those who were already battling mental health challenges are finding it nearly impossible to cope in this new reality. Among the stories of fear and despair, there are rare glimmers of hope and resilience. I spoke with another mother, Angela, who recounted her harrowing journey through a city in lockdown to reunite with her children. They were with their father when everything started, she said. I hadn't heard from them in days. and I couldn't just sit there wondering if they were okay. So I left. Angela described navigating abandoned streets, encountering both the infected and other survivors along the way. I saw things I'll never forget, she admitted, but I kept going. I had to. When I finally got to the house and saw my kids, it was like the world stopped for a moment. They're scared. We all are. But at least we're together now. Stories like Angela's remind us that even in the darkest times, the bonds of love and family can drive us to extraordinary lengths. Journalists, too, are risking their lives to bring us the truth. Amanda Cruz, the reporter I spoke with earlier, called back after witnessing yet another clash between citizens and law enforcement. This time, it was outside a distribution center where the military was handing out emergency rations. People had been waiting for hours, she said. Some had kids with them. Others had walked miles to get there. But when the soldiers ran out of supplies, it turned ugly. People started shouting, pushing. One man threw a rock, and that's when the soldiers opened fire. Not at the crowd, but over their heads. It was a warning, but it scared everyone. People scattered, and some didn't even get their rations. Her voice was heavy with emotion as she added, I get it. The soldiers are just following orders, and the people are just trying to survive. But moments like that, it feels like we're losing our humanity. As I sit here in the studio recounting these stories, I can't help but wonder, what happens next? The systems we've relied on for so long are failing, and the cracks are widening by the hour. Governments are trying to maintain control, but their efforts are often hampered by bureaucracy, mistrust, and the sheer scale of the crisis. For now, all we can do is hold on to the fragments of normalcy we have left. Stay connected with your loved ones, even if it's just through a phone call. Be cautious, but don't let fear consume you. And above all, remember that you're not alone. Good evening, listeners. This is Alex on VoiceCast, and tonight we're diving into one of the most haunting questions of this outbreak. What is this virus? What could be so devastating, so unlike anything we've seen before, that it reduces humanity to primal violent instincts? To answer this, we turn to the scientists and researchers who are racing against time to understand the biology behind the outbreak. First, let's address the chilling reality that has gripped the world's attention. What we're seeing, bodies that seem lifeless one moment, only to reanimate moments later, is not something easily explained by conventional biology. I spoke earlier with Dr. Aaron Patel, a neuroscientist who has been analyzing the outbreak since its early stages. Reanimation, as the public is calling it, isn't exactly accurate, Dr. Patel explained. These individuals aren't coming back to life. What we're observing is the virus taking control of their bodies in a way that overrides their normal brain function. Essentially, it's hijacking their central nervous system. Dr. Patel described how the virus appears to target specific areas of the brain, particularly the limbic system, which governs emotion, survival instincts, and aggression. The higher functions of the brain, reasoning, empathy, decision-making, are effectively shut down. What's left is a being driven purely by instinct, the need to feed, the need to attack. This explanation aligns with reports from survivors who have described the infected as unrelenting, seemingly unaware of pain or fear. But how does the virus achieve this level of control? That's the question scientists are struggling to answer. Dr. Patel speculated that the virus may produce neurotoxins that inhibit normal brain activity while simultaneously stimulating the motor cortex, allowing the body to remain mobile. It's an elegant, if horrifying mechanism, he admitted. The infected aren't truly undead, but they're far from alive as we understand it. While the biology of the virus is terrifying in its own right, the speed at which it's spreading is equally alarming. Dr. Meredith Hahn, the epidemiologist we've heard from before, confirmed today that cases have been reported in nearly every major country. This is no longer a localized outbreak, she said. It's global. And if the reports we're receiving are accurate, the virus's mutation rate is accelerating, which makes containment nearly impossible. Dr. Hahn elaborated on the virus's ability to adapt. Pathogens mutate. It's a fact of nature. But this virus, it's something else entirely. It seems to anticipate resistance. Treatments that showed initial promise have already proven ineffective. It's as if the virus is evolving faster than we can study it. Her words are a grim reminder of just how outmatched humanity seems to be. Amidst the despair, there are scientists who refuse to give up. One of them is Dr. Elena Ruiz, a virologist working in a high-security lab on the outskirts of San Diego. I managed to get in touch with her through a secure line, and her story is nothing short of harrowing. Our facility went into lockdown 2 days ago, she began. We received a sample from one of the early infection sites, a tiny vial of blood, barely enough to work with. But even in those few drops, we found something extraordinary. The virus isn't just a single entity. It's a network, a system that communicates with itself on a cellular level. It's like it's alive, aware. Dr. Ruiz and her team have been working around the clock, analyzing the virus, and searching for weaknesses. But their efforts are hampered by the facility's lockdown. We can't leave. We can't bring in new supplies. Half my team is running on caffeine and adrenaline, and the other half is showing symptoms of something. I don't know if it's stress or the virus itself. Her voice grew quieter as she recounted a recent incident. One of our researchers, he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, started acting strangely. At first, we thought it was exhaustion. But then he became agitated. He lashed out, breaking equipment, shouting nonsense. We had to restrain him. Now he's in quarantine. But I don't know how much longer we can keep him there. If we lose him, we lose so much knowledge. Despite these challenges, Dr. Ruiz remains determined. We're close, Alex. I know we are. But close might not be enough. Developing a vaccine is the ultimate goal, but it's proving to be an insurmountable task. Dr. Hahn explained why. Vaccines work by introducing a weakened or inactive form of a virus into the body, allowing the immune system to build a defense. But with this virus mutating so rapidly, any vaccine we develop would likely be obsolete within days. She also expressed concern about the ethical dilemmas surrounding vaccine trials. In normal circumstances, we have time to test for safety and efficacy. But these aren't normal circumstances. Desperation is driving some to take shortcuts, testing experimental treatments on infected individuals without proper oversight. It's a dangerous path, but it's one many feel we have no choice but to take. As I spoke with these scientists, it became clear that the virus's origins are still shrouded in mystery. However, new evidence suggests that the outbreak may not have been as sudden as we believed. Dr. Ruiz hinted at a timeline that predates the first reported cases. There are signs that this virus has been around longer than we thought, she said. We've found genetic markers that suggest it's been dormant in isolated pockets, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. The question is, what triggered it now? This revelation raises unsettling questions about the virus's nature. Is it purely biological, or is there something more at play? Could human activity, climate change, deforestation, or even experimental research have awakened a sleeping threat? Dr. Hahn offered one final thought before ending our call. The more we learn about this virus, the more we realize how little we understand. But one thing is certain. It's us against it. And right now, it's winning. As we delve deeper into the science of this outbreak, one thing becomes clear. This virus is unlike anything we've faced before. Its ability to manipulate the human body, its rapid mutation rate, and its potential global reach make it a foe unlike any other. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there is a sliver of hope. The scientists I spoke to are working tirelessly, sacrificing their safety, their sanity, and in some cases, their lives to find answers. We may not know how this story ends, but for now, we must keep fighting. As the hours stretch into days, we're witnessing the disintegration of society in real time. What began as an outbreak has evolved into a full-scale collapse, unraveling the systems and structures we once relied on. Tonight, we'll delve into how the pillars of our world, our infrastructure, economy, and sense of community are crumbling under the weight of this crisis. Let's start with infrastructure, the invisible threads that hold our daily lives together. Those threads are snapping one by one. Power outages are becoming increasingly common. In some areas, utility companies have shut down operations entirely, unable to ensure the safety of their workers. In others, the infected have overrun facilities, leaving entire regions without electricity. Residents who still have power are urged to conserve it, but for many, it's already too late. Communication networks are also failing. Cell towers are going offline, either due to lack of maintenance or deliberate sabotage by those who believe the networks are spreading the virus. Internet outages are widespread, and even emergency broadcast systems are becoming unreliable. In a world where information is critical, we're losing the ability to share it. The supply chain is in shambles. Grocery stores, pharmacies, and distribution centers are emptying out, with no trucks arriving to replenish them. Truck drivers, warehouse workers, and factory staff are either too sick, too scared, or too overwhelmed to continue working. What little food and medicine remain are being hoarded, stolen, or sold at exorbitant prices. Hospitals, once sanctuaries of healing, have become places of despair. Many have simply shut their doors, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of patients and the lack of resources. Critical care units are being abandoned as doctors and nurses make impossible choices. Who to save and who to leave behind. One nurse I spoke to described the heartbreaking scene at her hospital. "We ran out of ventilators days ago," she said. "We're running out of everything, medication, beds, even clean water." I had to look a mother in the eyes and tell her we couldn't save her child. She begged me, Alex. She got down on her knees and begged me. And there was nothing I could do. For those trapped in these failing systems, hope is dwindling. The economic fallout of this crisis is staggering. Markets have crashed to levels not seen in decades, wiping out trillions of dollars in wealth overnight. Banks are closing their doors, and ATMs are running dry. Even those with money find it increasingly worthless as currency devalues at an alarming rate. Businesses, large and small, are shutting down, unable to function in the chaos. Entire industries, tourism, hospitality, manufacturing, have ground to a halt, leaving millions unemployed. For those who once thrived in a world of abundance, the sudden scarcity of basic necessities is a harsh and shocking reality. The collapse of the economy has also led to a surge in crime. Desperation is driving people to do the unthinkable. Looting and theft are rampant, and in some places, organized groups are forming to take control of resources by force. One store owner I spoke to described how his small grocery shop was overtaken. They came at night, he said, 10, maybe 12 of them. They broke the windows, took everything. I tried to stop them, but they had guns. I've had that store for 30 years. Now, it's gone. The economic collapse is reshaping the very fabric of our society, creating a landscape where survival is the only currency that matters. But perhaps the most insidious impact of this crisis is the toll it's taking on our minds. Fear is everywhere. Fear of the infected, fear of each other, fear of what comes next. In neighborhoods across the country, trust is eroding. Neighbors who once borrowed sugar and exchanged pleasantries now eye each other with suspicion, wondering who might be infected or hoarding supplies. Entire communities are retreating into isolation, locking their doors and shutting out the world. For those who are alone, the psychological toll is even greater. I spoke with a man named Derek, a traveler who's been making his way through abandoned towns in search of food and shelter. It's the silence that gets to you, he said. You walk through these empty streets and all you can hear is your own footsteps. Sometimes you see a shadow in a window and wonder if it's a person or one of them. You tell yourself to keep going, but the loneliness, it's like a weight on your chest. You start to wonder if you're even still human. Amid the chaos, stories of families struggling to survive paint a vivid picture of the human cost of this collapse. One such story comes from the Johnsons, a family of 4 who've barricaded themselves inside their home. I spoke with Sarah Johnson, a mother of 2 young children. Her voice was filled with exhaustion and despair. We haven't left the house in days, she told me. We've pushed furniture against the doors, nailed boards over the windows. My husband is constantly on edge, pacing with the shotgun we bought years ago and never thought we'd need. Their food supplies are dwindling, and the uncertainty is gnawing at them. We don't know how much longer we can hold out, Sarah admitted. Every sound outside makes my heart stop. Is it someone coming to help, or is it them? The Johnson story is not unique. Across the country, families are making impossible choices. Stay and risk being overrun, or leave and face the dangers outside. And for many, the lines between safety and peril are becoming increasingly blurred. For those who do venture out, the world they encounter is a stark and haunting reminder of what we've lost. Derek, the lone traveler I spoke with earlier, described the eerie silence of an abandoned city. You expect it to be loud, chaotic, he said, but it's not. It's quiet. Too quiet. You see cars left in the middle of the road, doors swinging open like people just vanished. Stores are empty. Houses look untouched. But you know no one's there. It's like walking through a graveyard, except the graves are whole cities. Derek recounted one particularly chilling moment when he entered a diner, hoping to find food. There were plates still on the tables, half-eaten meals. The jukebox was stuck, playing the same note over and over. It was like time had stopped, and then I heard it. A faint rustling in the kitchen. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I ran. For Derek, the emptiness is almost as terrifying as the infected. The worst part is knowing there used to be life here. Laughter, conversations, people living their lives. Now, it's just gone. As the outbreak continues to spread, the cracks in our society are widening into chasms. The systems we once trusted, our governments, our healthcare, our infrastructure are failing us. And in their absence, humanity is splintering. In some areas, communities are coming together, pooling resources and protecting one another. But these instances are becoming rarer as fear and mistrust take hold. More often, it's every person for themselves. I received a call from a listener in Detroit who described how her neighborhood has devolved into a war zone. People are forming groups, setting up barricades, patrolling the streets. At first, it was to keep the infected out, but now they're fighting each other. One group thinks the other is hoarding supplies, and it's turning violent. I heard gunshots last night. I don't know how much longer we can stay here. In rural areas, the story is different, but no less grim. Farmers are abandoning their fields, unable to harvest crops or care for livestock. In some cases, the infected have overrun entire farms, leaving behind scenes of devastation. The result is a growing food shortage that will only exacerbate the crisis in the coming weeks. The psychological toll of this outbreak is impossible to overstate. Fear, isolation, and grief are taking their toll on even the strongest among us. Mental health professionals, already in short supply before the outbreak, are now completely unavailable. For many, the weight of this new reality is simply too much to bear. One particularly heartbreaking story comes from a father who called into the station earlier today. "My wife didn't make it," he said, his voice trembling. She couldn't handle it. The fear, the uncertainty. She left a note saying she didn't want to see our world fall apart. He paused, his breath hitching. Now it's just me and my daughter. I don't know how to explain to her what happened. I don't even know how to explain it to myself. These are the hidden casualties of the outbreak. The lives lost not to the virus itself, but to the despair it leaves in its wake. As I sit here in the studio, reflecting on these stories, one thing is clear. The fabric of our society is unraveling. The systems we once thought were unshakable are crumbling, leaving us to navigate a world that feels increasingly unrecognizable. And yet, even in the darkness, there are glimmers of light. Stories of families holding on, of strangers helping one another, of individuals finding strength they never knew they had. We may be fractured, but we are not yet broken. As long as we hold on to our humanity, there is still hope. I'm broadcasting to you from an increasingly uncertain world, one where the threads of civilization are unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. The outbreak we've been chronicling since its first whispers has grown into a monstrous storm, consuming cities, lives, and hope itself. Tonight, I bring you the final moments of what can only be described as humanity's darkest hour. Major cities across the globe are falling. The military, once our most powerful defense, is retreating, unable to contain the sheer number of infected. Reports from New York paint a harrowing picture. The once bustling metropolis is now eerily quiet, save for the echoing screams and the relentless groans of the infected. Earlier today, the National Guard abandoned their posts in Times Square, leaving behind hastily written warnings painted on the pavement. Do not enter. You won't make it out. In Los Angeles, the freeways, once symbols of endless mobility, are now graveyards of abandoned cars and desperate escapes gone wrong. Military helicopters were seen evacuating high-ranking officials, leaving behind millions of residents to fend for themselves. One survivor, a firefighter named Rick, described the chaos before the military's retreat. We were holding a line near downtown, trying to keep people moving, he said. Then they broke through, hundreds of them pouring out of the side streets, climbing over barricades like it was nothing. We radioed for backup, but the only response we got was, "Evacuate if you can." That's when I realized they weren't coming back for us. We were on our own. The scenes from smaller cities and towns are no less grim. In Cincinnati, residents took to the streets to create makeshift barriers, using anything they could find, cars, furniture, even mattresses. But these efforts were no match for the relentless tide of infected. By nightfall, the barriers were breached and the city went silent. As the situation spirals, world leaders have taken to the airwaves one last time to address their nations. The tone is universally somber, the words heavy with resignation. In a live broadcast earlier today, the President of the United States appeared visibly shaken. "My fellow Americans," he began, his voice trembling, "we are facing an enemy unlike any we've encountered before. We have done everything in our power to contain this outbreak, but we were not prepared for this." He paused, looking off camera, as if searching for the right words. "We must now focus on survival. Stay with your loved ones. Stay safe. And above all, do not lose hope." Moments after the broadcast ended, reports surfaced that the White House was being evacuated. Similar addresses have been made by leaders worldwide, each one a grim farewell, as communication systems fail and governments lose their grip. In Canada, the Prime Minister's final words were hauntingly poetic. "The sun will rise again. It may not be tomorrow or the day after, but it will rise. Until then, hold on to each other. Hold on to what makes us human." But even as these messages try to inspire hope, the reality is undeniable. The very systems that once connected and protected us are disappearing, leaving behind a world that feels smaller and more dangerous than ever. Amidst the chaos, small groups of survivors are banding together, forming fragile alliances in the face of an unforgiving world. I spoke with a man named Jacob, who managed to escape the fall of Chicago with a handful of strangers. There were 10 of us at first, Jacob said. We met in the basement of an old apartment building when the streets got too dangerous. We didn't know each other, but we knew we had a better chance together. Jacob described how they worked as a team to scavenge for supplies, taking turns keeping watch during the night. But even with their combined efforts, the dangers were immense. We lost 3 people yesterday, he said, his voice cracking. One of them, Marta, she was just a kid. She tried to help someone who fell behind, but they got her. I keep telling myself we did what we could, but it doesn't feel like enough. His group is now on the move, heading toward what they hope is a safe zone, though the existence of such a place is unconfirmed. We don't know where we're going, really, Jacob admitted, but stopping feels like giving up, and none of us are ready to do that yet. As the outbreak spreads unchecked, the world is rapidly transforming into a place unrecognizable to those who once called it home. With communication networks failing and transportation grinding to a halt, the sense of connection that once united nations and communities is disappearing. In some places, local radio stations are the only remaining lifelines, broadcasting fragments of news and pleas for help. I received a message from a small station operator in rural Idaho who shared his experience. It's just me here now, he said. I've been on air for 48 hours straight, telling people what I know, which isn't much. I'm running out of fuel for the generator, and when it's gone, that's it. No more updates. No more anything. The collapse of infrastructure is leaving entire regions isolated, with no way to know what's happening beyond their immediate surroundings. For many, this isolation is as terrifying as the infected themselves. One story that stuck with me is that of Rachel and her family, who have been hiding in a storm shelter beneath their home. Rachel reached out to the station via a brief satellite phone call. My husband and I have been here with our 2 kids for 5 days now, she explained. We have some canned food, bottled water, and a battery-powered lantern, but we can hear them outside, scratching at the door, moaning. We don't know if anyone's coming for us. We don't even know if there's anyone left out there to come. When I asked how she and her family were holding up, Rachel's voice broke. We're trying to stay strong for the kids, but they're scared. They keep asking when we can go outside again. And I don't have an answer. I don't know if we'll ever be able to. Her story is a stark reminder of the fragility of our situation. For many, survival has become a waiting game, with no clear end in sight. As cities fall and survivors scatter, the once familiar sounds of civilization, traffic, laughter, the hum of daily life, have been replaced by an eerie silence. Derek, the lone traveler we've heard from before, described walking through what used to be a bustling suburb. There was this playground, he said, his voice heavy with emotion, swings still moving in the wind like the kids had just left. But there were no kids, no parents, no one, just the sound of the chains creaking. I stood there for a while, trying to imagine what it must have been like before all this. But it's hard to picture now. Derek's account highlights a growing sense of mourning, not just for the lives lost, but for the world we've left behind. And so, listeners, as the sun sets on this day of chaos, we are left with more questions than answers. The infected continue to spread, cities continue to fall, and the systems that once held us together are gone. In the face of such overwhelming despair, we must ask ourselves, can humanity survive the night, or is this the beginning of the end? This is Alex on VoiceCast signing off for now. Wherever you are, whoever you're with, hold on. We'll need each other in the days to come. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and share it so more people can experience it too. And if you have any suggestions or feedback, don't hesitate to drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel because your support is what drives us to create more amazing content. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.